afternoon, my friends, and welcome to another exciting installment of, I guess, Monday Reload. From very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good afternoon, my friends, and welcome to the program. First, let me apologize for having to publish this a little bit later than I expected. Normally, on Monday mornings, I have an episode ready to go for you at 10 a.m., but this morning, the stars were not aligned to make that happen. Let me be more specific. Crime is alive and well in the Cowboy State, specifically in Sheridan County. We had a little criminal activity transpire at the Cowboy State Politics studio, or around the studio. While it's a major inconvenience for the lovely Christine and I, have no fear, the Sheridan Police Department is on the case. An arrest is imminent and felony charges are forthcoming. I'll give you more details when that arrest has actually happened and I'm free to speak a little bit more openly about it. One thing is for certain. If you're a criminal and you want to remain anonymous, you should not pick me or the lovely Christine to perpetrate your heinous crime upon. Needless to say, that person is going to end up being the most famous petty criminal in the state of Wyoming. That is, of course, if you could consider felony theft a petty crime. In any case, I'll keep you updated with that person's identity, what they did, where they were at, what they've done recently, their entire criminal history, and everything about them when I'm able to release those details. But as I said, it'll probably happen pretty soon. All of that unpleasantness aside, the show must go on. On today's program, I have a great discussion with Park County Representative Rachel Rodriguez-Williams. She's running for re-election in House District 50, which is, broadly speaking, pretty much around Cody. Last election cycle, Representative Rodriguez-Williams didn't have an opponent in the Republican primary, but this year it's different. A guy by the name of David Hill has filed to run against the good representative. It's been a while since Representative Rachel has been on the program. You might remember her from one of my favorite episodes on Cowboy State Politics. It's entitled, "We All Agree It's a Baby." In that episode, I talked about a fantastic speech that Representative Rachel Rodriguez-Williams gave on the floor of the Wyoming House. You're going to hear me reference it during the interview, but I thought since we're going to be talking to the author of that speech, I may as well just play it for you. Here it is.
I thank my colleagues for bringing up the concern of women that have been victims of rape or incest. But the reality is that two wrongs don't make a right. Abortion is not health care, and abortion is murder. I'm going to tell you why I'm pro-life in all cases. Even rape, even incest, even in the hardest and most difficult scenarios. And I can explain why. My view of humanity is inclusive, indeed wide open, and I'm very culturally competent. Life is sacred. Babies in the womb are innocent. Babies in the womb are living human beings. Non-living things cannot develop into living things. Unborn children are alive because born people are alive. And no living thing could have ever been a non-living thing. If something is alive, then it must be part of some species or another. There can be nothing that is alive, but not of a species. If unborn children are not human, then they would be of another species, which is to suggest that through the course of your existence, you switch from one species to a different one. And that, of course, is absurd and impossible.
Pretty sound argument, isn't it? That's the lady that we're going to be talking to next. But first, let's get a word in from our sponsors. Monday Afternoon Reload is brought to you by Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. If you're the person that decided to get the heck out of communist California and move to a red state, and then soon after realized that you had picked the one Democrat county in an entire state, and now you've made the decision to sell out and actually move to Wyoming, well then Rebecca Bextel is your gal. Give her a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. She's sold everything from big giant ranches all the way down to small residential properties all across the state of Wyoming. She's lived in Jackson for over 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. So if you're thinking about buying or selling or actually moving to Wyoming, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519. Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for an outbuilding or a garage or maybe a barn or a roping arena or perhaps even a giant warehouse for your business, the two guys you need to call are Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. They are the experts in metal building construction. They've been doing it longer than anybody else around, and they definitely do a much better job than anybody else. So it doesn't really matter what type of metal building you're thinking about. Give Nick and Jesse a call, tell them what's on your mind, and they'll handle all the details. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. The following advertisement was paid for by Reed Reisner for Senate.
I'm Reed Reisner, and I'm running for United States Senate because our politicians have forgotten what's important. They spend billions protecting borders in Europe and do nothing about our border. You deserve better. Wyoming deserves better. That's why I'm running, to serve you. Join me, and let's send new blood and a strong backbone to D.C. before it's too late. Go to reedreisner.com to learn more and join the fight.
Coming on Wednesday, I have a special presentation of Cowboy State Politics, an interview with Harmeet Dillon. If you're unfamiliar with the name, you certainly know her work. She was the lawyer who was instrumental in keeping Donald Trump on the Colorado ballot. She ran against Ronna McDaniel for the chair of the Republican National Committee. She also represents a couple of different young people who are suing medical, quote-unquote, professionals for gender reassignment surgery that was done to them when they were minors. It's a great conversation. It's probably one of the best interviews that I've done. So that's going to happen on Wednesday's program. Okay, let's get on with the program. Here is my great discussion with Park County Representative for House District 50, Rachel Rodriguez Williams. Joining me on the program once again is Representative Rachel Rodriguez Williams from Park County. Rachel, welcome to Cowboy State Politics.
Thanks for having me on, David.
Well, it's been a while since you've been on the program, so why don't you just take a couple minutes and tell my audience about yourself?
Thank you. So my name is Rachel Rodriguez Williams, and I reside in Cody, Wyoming. And I currently represent House District 50, which is a pretty rural area. I serve a little bit of Cody, the east end of Cody. I serve Ralston, Clark, Crandall, the Heart Mountain area of Powell. And I would say that I have very engaged constituents and very conservative constituents. And I am finishing up my second term. As you know, we have 2-year terms in the House of Representatives, and it really, really has been a pleasure to serve, an honor to serve, and boy, there is so much to fight for in the legislature. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm interested in serving the people's seat in the people's house again for another two years.
All right, so as this is going to be your third term, I mean, I guess a pretty good perfunctory question is, why have you decided to run for a third term? Are there some things you haven't finished up or some other ideas you're going to tackle? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so in the House of Representatives, conservatives do not have the majority. And so I would say that there is a lot of unfinished business in the legislature. We have won a few very good battles, but I think one of the things that could happen if conservatives have the majority in the legislature in both chambers is that we could be really preventative. As you know, the left has moving goalposts. They continue to get more and more radical. And Wyoming's legacy industry is in jeopardy. And so is our way of life. And so I think that Wyoming historically has been very reactive, and that comes down to leadership. One of the things that we often hear is, well, that's not happening in Wyoming, so we don't need to pass a bill on it. And I have never heard anything more ridiculous, because if it's happening in another state, more than likely, it's going to try to come to Wyoming and try to infestate Wyoming. And so I think that we have a lot to learn from other states, and we can be proactive and not reactive, and we can be preventative, and we can stand strong for Wyoming and for our way of life. And so I want to be part of that. I want to be part of the grassroots movement that is really, really strong right now. We've worked really hard to listen to the people, to act on behalf of the people, and to be a voice for the people in the state legislature.
Well, certainly. Having grown up in Wyoming, I can tell you for a fact that whatever happens in other states, it usually takes a year, 2 years before it comes here. Having done a lot of research into a whole bunch of things that all these leftists are doing in other states, I can tell you for a fact that there's many things that some in the legislature would claim, well, that's not happening here, that are absolutely happening here. For a long time, Wyoming has been very reactive, not preventative, not proactive, tended to show up late to the ballgame on a lot of these things.
Absolutely.
Rachel, one question I have for you is, typically for a freshman or even a second-term representative, it's pretty hard to get a bill passed. And you, unlike a lot of your colleagues, have been pretty successful in getting legislation passed. Could you just talk to me about the trigger bill that you were able to get through and the Life as a Human Right Act for a few minutes?
Sure. One of the strongest pillars of my campaign, my freshman year campaign that I carried out, was able to carry out successfully, was being a voice for the unborn. And my experience in working in the pro-life industry and my experience as an advocate for the unborn really came into play my freshman year. And I think that the court case, the Dobbs court case, really wasn't on the radar for many people. And so what happened is we have a pretty good coalition, a pro-life coalition within the state legislature. And we worked together and drafted legislation, which was referred to as the trigger bill. And essentially what it amounted to was if Roe were ever overturned, then abortion would be outlawed in the state of Wyoming, should that bill pass. And going in as a freshman, knowing that we were a red state, I assumed that there would be more support for this type of legislation. And believe it or not, it was a battle on the floor. There are a lot of people that say that they're pro-life, but when it comes down to certain situations, they believe in exceptions. And I was a little appalled and just kind of mind blown about the arguments that were and the debate that was taking place on the floor. It was a battle against the pro-abort lobbyists. It was a battle against some of our own, some of my colleagues that represent the same party as I do, that serve with the supermajority to get that legislation passed. And so, yes, I was able to work with the coalition, and we were able to get that bill passed, and it was really exciting.
Yeah, that was actually pretty fun to watch. Well, two things, I guess. First, it was fun to see the bill pass the legislature. That was the good side of it. The real disappointing side was all of the arguments against it. Like you said, we have a really red state. Well, the people are, but the politicians, not so much. And it in a way, it was kind of disheartening, but you could tell, from my perspective, you could tell that God was working, just because every argument that came up, people were very hesitant to make it. And in the end, it didn't work anyway. And, frankly, one of my favorite speeches of yours is, and I still play it every once in a while on the program, but it's the one where you said, I'm going to tell you why I'm pro-life in every situation. And the funny thing about that is, right after you gave the speech, even people who were very pro-choice in the legislature got up and said, okay, we admit it's a baby. And it was, from that moment, you were like, yep, we got this. Okay, so that one got passed. And then the next session, you introduced the Life as a Human Right Act. And, both the trigger bill and that one are now tied up in court. So where are those at right now?
Well, the Teton County District Court and the Wyoming Supreme Court have been playing, I would say, kind of a game of ping pong with that case. It's gone back and forth. Right now, it's in the hands of Teton County District Court, and some constitutional questions need to be answered. As you know, the Dobbs decision put states in a position where they have the right to pass life bills, pro-life legislation. And so we acted on that. And the majority of the Wyoming legislature agreed that life begins at conception and that abortion is not health care. And so, as you said, there's a holdup in court. And so we anxiously await that decision. I don't know how long that'll take, but in the meantime, babies are dying. We've had several abortion mills set up shop in the state of Wyoming, new ones, and it's sad. It's very sad. But I can tell you that I am so proud of spearheading that bill, Life is a Human Right, and the support that I received, all the co-sponsors in the legislature that signed on to that bill, and our pro-life coalition within the legislature they were all champions. It's not something that I could have done alone. And there were folks from all sides, different caucuses that exist within the legislature that joined on board with that. But even looking at the most outer circle of support from that bill came from advocates and stakeholders in all of the communities throughout Wyoming. So you're well aware of Wyoming Right to Life, which I'm proudly endorsed by, and the fact that many counties have Right to Life chapters. Beyond that, there are several churches, there are several other associations and organizations that exist that really, really came together to draft that legislation, to push that legislation through committees and through advocating individual legislators as it went through the process. And then essentially, it was enacted into law. And it wasn't enacted without the governor's signature.
So you are one of the few conservatives in the legislature that actually have some sort of a leadership position. I mean, you're the vice chair of Judiciary. Could you explain to my listeners what your role is there, why that position is so important?
Yeah, so I've served on Judiciary, House Judiciary, both terms. And this past term, I was asked to serve as the vice chair of House Judiciary at the pleasure of our chairman, Representative Art Washut, out of Casper or Natrona County. This year, we heard a few life bills, being that we're on the topic, but it really is a committee that carries a lot of weight. My first term, we actually, the Speaker of the House, Eric Barlow, if you served on Judiciary, that was your only committee because we met every day. This past 2 years with Speaker Summers, Judiciary did not serve or meet every day. So the weight was a little less. I think that some legislators were assigned more committees than what they should be. And I'll give you an example. So we have a representative out of Jackson who represents the minority party. And she is on far more committees than I am as a freshman. Okay. And here I am in my second term, a staunch conservative and pigeonholed to one committee. So again, that's politics. Of course, it probably has to do with something about not getting behind the speaker when it came time for electing a Speaker of the House. Some leaders feel like they have to punish legislators, and that's, I guess, part of politics. So be it.
All right, so let's talk a little bit of politics. You're also a member of the Freedom Caucus, the House Freedom Caucus. You guys have been hammered pretty hard for a variety of different things. The media claims that, a bunch of you are from out of state and you're just these Johnny-come-lately carpetbaggers that just moved to Wyoming and try to push your agenda on the rest of us 25-generation Wyomingites. Of course, I'm exaggerating because I think the argument's absolutely ridiculous. First, why is the Freedom Caucus important? And second, why are you a member?
So I am a proud member of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, and I have been since my freshman year. I believe that the Freedom Caucus is the conscience of the Republican Party platform. We believe in the platform. We fight for the platform. We carry out the platform when we debate on bills and really stand up for it. We all believe in God and our country and our state. And so a lot of the values that are carried out and instilled in the members of the Freedom Caucus, I align with. I call them essentially my brothers and sisters in the House. They are freedom fighters, and I find joy in being a member. And I believe that there is a lot of misconceptions out there about who we are and what we stand for. And that mainly comes from the swayed media.
I would absolutely agree. So you have an opponent this year. I'm assuming that, you're going to campaign regardless, but talk to me about how different the race might be having an opponent this year and being challenged for your seat.
Sure. So the last campaign, I had a libertarian that ran against me. This campaign, I have a Republican running against me that claims to be, quote, conservative, unquote. And so I think that I'm in a situation where I know that I have been a great listener for my constituents. And I'm close to my constituents, and I have very conservative constituents. And so I know that they trust me. It will be interesting to see how the campaign pans out, but I believe that there are differences between myself and my opponent because I have a proven record. Not only do I have a proven voting record, but I am trusted, and I am known to be a very ethical and bold legislator. And so it's not a big secret. I mean, everybody knows that we are on the verge of becoming Colorado. The state is under attack from all directions. This is a critical election. And so one of the things that I am proud of too is I don't represent any special interest groups. My vote is not for sale. Okay. And what we see often in the legislature is special interest groups lobbying for their own interests and not for the people. And statewide, we know that Wyoming wants to stay Wyoming. We don't want to become Colorado. We don't want to succumb to federal pressure from the Biden administration. We want to stand up and we want to fight. And so there are lots of things that the legislature can do, including veto override the governor when we don't agree. And I think that, again, that this is really a critical election because we have the opportunity to take the House as conservatives. We have the opportunity to have the majority in the House. And I hope that we can hold the line in the Senate because the Senate really has had the majority by a slim margin. But essentially, if we as conservatives persevere in this election in the House and the Senate, we can do some great things for the state of Wyoming on behalf of we the people.
Do you think we passed any sort of tax reform or tax relief in the 2024 session?
The tax bills that came forward this session were definitely Band-Aids. They were temporary fixes. Wyoming needs real, bold reform. And the only way that that's going to happen is if we control spending. We control spending and we also reform property taxes, the structure. And to go on further, the only way both of those things are going to happen is if conservatives have the majority. So when you vote conservative this election, you're voting for the chance for real reform, not a Band-Aid. We struggled. We fought and fought and fought and voted and voted and voted to keep the people's money in their pockets, to keep as much as we could in their pockets. And so there's this mentality by tax and spend Republicans that align with the Democrats and vote with the Democrats that we need to grow government. And you know, and I know that that's not a Republican value. We believe in limited government. And so moving forward, I think that we need to check our spending in the state and we need to strive for reform. We enter these sessions and there often is a surplus. And there's this majority in the legislature that thinks that we need to take that surplus and we need to spend that money. And the reality is that's the people's money. That's your money. That's my money. And it needs to go back to the people. If we have a surplus, then we've taxed too much.
That's my big argument with the property tax refund. You know, a lot of legislators point to that as saying, well, look, we've brought you some relief. Well, the reality is, if you have enough money to have a refund program, you're taxing too much because you obviously don't need it, because if you needed it, you wouldn't be refunding it. And I mean, the biggest problem that I see in the Wyoming legislature is just what you mentioned, that we spend way too much. And we have this mistaken idea that we need to have as much revenue as possible to support our increased spending. And I mean, it is just one giant vicious circle.
If you look further upstream, what it comes down to is the need to elect legislators that understand the proper role of government. So what is the role of government in the state of Wyoming? What's essential? You know, roads, bridges, public safety being adequately funded, etc. So elections have consequences. If we want to rein in spending, then we need to elect conservatives. If you want to keep it unchecked, then you elect somebody from the uniparty.
Exactly. So should you get elected, what are some of the priorities that you want to work on for the next session, or the next two sessions, actually?
Controlling spending is obviously the first one priority that parallels with bold reform and property taxes. Again, I think that what we accomplished was a temporary fix, was a Band-Aid, and we have a lot of work to do. And the only way that anything is going to change is if we get the conservative majority in both chambers. So that is, of course, my priority. Another priority is universal school choice. We have just kind of touched the surface on that and haven't been able to pass universal school choice. And the way I see it is we should be funding students, not systems. And so the money should follow the child, and parents, families, Wyoming families should be able to choose where they want their child to be educated, whether it's in the home, whether it's through a virtual academy, online school, charter school. There's so many options out there, and that's the choice of the parents.
I couldn't agree more. Well, Rachel, I want to thank you very much for taking some time to visit with me this afternoon. If people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Getting a hold of me is really easy, and I encourage it. If you do have questions about my campaign or any pending legislation that's going on through the interim, you can call my phone number, 307-250-5008. You can text me. You can email me. My email is Williams, FORHD 50@gmail.com. That's Williams for HD50 @gmail.com.
Well, once again, Rachel, thank you very much for taking the time to visit with me, and you're welcome back here anytime you like.
I appreciate it, David. Thank you.
That'll do it for today's late installment of Morning Reload. Have a good week, and we'll talk again on Wednesday when I'm going to bring you that interview with Harmeet Dillon. You definitely don't want to miss that one. It's absolutely fantastic. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.